Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. This is your podcast host, Steve Ramona, and I've got a unique guest that's got some incredible stuff that you probably do every day of your life, but you can learn how to do it better and more effective. Dan, welcome to the show.
Steve, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're so welcome. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Stories, that's what you do. What's really a good keys to a good story?
The first thing that, to my mind, is the key to a great story is a saying that I love to tell people, which is the phrase "we got it all in there" should be said with a sense of shame, right? The phrase "we got it all in there" should be said with a sense of shame, right? It was often attributed to Abraham Lincoln, but he didn't say it, or Mark Twain, actually, but he didn't say it, which is, I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I wrote a long one. Right? The first key to a great story is brevity. You can always go a little bit more. And one of the ways I think about this is, when you have a kid and you want your kid to eat their vegetables, you're not going to pile a plate high with carrots and peas and string beans, right? You're going to give them 3 little peas, 3 little carrots, 3 little string beans. They eat those, then they have more. So that's the first key to a great story is keeping it short and leave people asking you and wanting more. It should be your entree. So that's one. 2 is it has to be honest to you, right? People can smell dishonesty a mile away, right? And 3, it takes practice. A good story should be told again and again. So think about a comedian, right? Comedian goes up there on stage and they deliver a flawless set. You know how many times they practice that? I'm a big John Mulaney fan. I don't know if he's one of yours, but I saw John Mulaney do a practice show at a local theater here a couple of years ago. And he was bombing left and right, and he knew it, right? And he's like, oh, I just drove that joke off the cliff, right? When I saw some of those same jokes on Netflix 2 years later, perfect, just perfect. So it requires practice. So telling people your stories again and again, even your spouse or partner might have to hear them too many times, is great. So practice, keep them short, make them honest, and then when they're honest and true to you, then they really become ownable. Those are your stories.
Authenticity sounds like it's a big part of this as well.
Yeah, authenticity is a huge part. And you have to sort of mine yourself sometimes, whether it's a business story or a personal story, right? Business, again, what I do is I help businesses tell their story better. And it's hard for some folks, right? It's hard. You have to be a little bit vulnerable. You have to open yourself up a little bit, because by telling stories, it's an incredibly personal side of yourself, right? So you have to put the work into it. Again, even if it's talking about why you created a company, right? It's not what you do, it's why you do it. That's what people remember.
That leads to we talked about in the green room before is culture. How does storytelling help the culture and bring it up?
Storytelling can be amazing for culture. And I've seen organizations do this, and it's like a flower blossoming, right? When storytelling becomes part of how you do business and people feel more connected. One of the things that I work with businesses on is not only doing storytelling for their customers, not only doing storytelling for their own employees, but for potential employees, right? We all want the best people to join our company. We want the best culture fits to join our company. So if you tell the stories of your company and they connect with it, they're probably the right people. And if they don't, then they're not, right? And storytelling becoming a core tenet of your culture can be really successful, can be really game changing.
And that's a great point. My chiropractor was just telling me on Monday, he was trying to hire somebody and he had one story he talked about. He hired 100 people, only 2 people liked the story and reacted the way he wanted to. That story got him
That's
a great
okay.
hire. So exactly what you just said. It's funny. We talked about this on Monday. You're right. But what's interesting, what are the keys to a good story? Well, I said that already. I'm thinking more about your storytelling. You're helping people with that. But you had 32 years in corporate America. Why you make that decision and go, okay, I'm going to be on my own and help people with storytelling?
When I started, in around 1990 working, right? The idea of storytelling didn't exist in the business world, right? I started off in PR and was putting out press releases and, doing this and that, right? It was all very aggressive kind of stuff. Over time, I realized what I was doing was storytelling. It was bringing that emotional aspect, getting beyond feature and function, right? Companies are very comfortable talking in feature and function. They're not as comfortable, though they are getting better at why, at storytelling. But even 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I don't know, right? If I had said, oh, I'm a storyteller, I think the reaction would have been, oh, that's cute, right? Now, people realize that it's such a great part of business. So I wanted to do that. I mean, one of the things about rising up in the corporate world is the higher you get, the less you can actually do the stuff that makes you passionate. I love mentoring people. It was really something I enjoyed. But at one point, one of my companies, I had a team of 22 people.
Wow.
Right? Crazy. So if you've got a team of 22 people and you're worrying about budgets and performance reviews and meetings and planning meetings and strategic meetings and this and that, right? Helping them with their problems. I was lucky if I got 5% of my week to be creative and thoughtful, right? Now I easily spend 40% of my week being creative, writing, ideating with my clients. So for me, my own personal journey, it's caused me to have a lightness about me, right? It's never easy running a business. You know this as well.
No.
It's never easy running a business, but it's your business. That's the other thing about a great story. One of the things I like to say is stories are the only things you truly own.
Yeah, it's true.
Everything else is fleeting.
Yeah, yeah.
Stories are what you make you what you are.
And you're in control of those stories too, with
Yeah.
the honesty, the brevity, and doing it over and
Yeah.
practicing over and over. Okay, we're on this story journey, which is great, and I agree. We're all telling stories. We need to be better. Let's go to the flip side. What's the challenges when people do a story that doesn't do what they want it to do?
They have to refine it, right? That's where it comes into, to honing that story, to making it work again and again, practicing it, asking people. So stopping and saying, hey, read back to me what you hear, right? So if you're talking to someone about your company, about your business, rather than monologuing the whole thing, you tell them about it, you tell them why you did it, and then say, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to you? And get their feedback. And if the story you want to tell is not resonating with them, it's not landing, find another way to do it.
Yeah.
Come back from a different angle, right? So you want to get a point across, okay? You want to get the point across, I, Steve, am a compassionate person. I could ask you, you could probably think of 4 stories right now off the top of your head that show why you're a compassionate person.
Yep.
I don't want you to tell me all 4 stories. I don't have time for that. But tell me one of them, right? Stories are a bridge to ideas. They're how you get your ideas across. So if one story isn't the one that's doing it, then maybe you try another story. I've got stories that I've tried to tell for years and I've never figured out how to tell them right. Like something that happened in an airport that I just found really interesting, but I couldn't figure out how to tell it the right way. I gave up on it. It's in the graveyard now.
Yeah. And that's probably a good place for it. And that's what we learn.
Yeah. So right, what did you learn from this thing? That's ultimately what people want to know. You tell this story in a business context. And that's, when I write stuff for LinkedIn, I'll tell a story and here's what I learned from this. Right? Here's what I learned from this, and here's how it can be applicable to you. I love telling stories about how businesses that I've interacted with have changed me, how I've bought into their brand, how I've bought into their mission. Right? Great creating when you do a good job. I wrote about this the other day. I thought this was kind of fun. So Seth Godin had this thing where he said, if Nike decided to open a hotel, you would have a pretty good idea of what it would be like. But if Hyatt decided to make a sneaker, you'd have no idea what it would be.
Interesting.
And part of the reason is Nike, people tell stories about Nike, right? When brands get people to tell stories about them, they're doing the work for them.
Yeah. It's going, passing on and on and on. Hey, did you hear the story? Yeah. No, I like that. Now, Simon Sinek, who I like, and a lot when people talk about, the why. He talks about the why. How is storytelling tied into the why of your business?
Yeah, storytelling, excuse me, storytelling builds that why. Storytelling builds the case for your why. And Sinek is exactly right. Start with the why, right? Why does your business exist? And, my business exists to make the world a little friendlier place. Good. Okay. Actually, my own business, right? My business exists to bring the joy and the power of storytelling to businesses. Great. That's my why. And then I create stories around that to prove that why. So the why and the stories, they're linked like peanut butter and chocolate.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
get ready for Halloween next week.
Yeah, exactly. It's around the corner. It's amazing. So what are the qualities of a servant leader to you?
So to me, someone who is willing to be vulnerable. We talked about vulnerability a little bit earlier, right? Someone who is willing to open up, and this is hard, right? This is hard. And as companies grow, it's even harder. So here's an example. So you're a founder of a company, and it's you and 3 friends in a garage or whatever. You're very comfortable being vulnerable. Guys, I'm scared here. I don't know if we can do this. What happens? We're mortgaging our houses to do this business. We're doing this thing. We're paying for our health insurance, right? Easy to be vulnerable then. When you start getting 20, 30, 40, 70 employees, all of a sudden, then you're just the CEO. You're the guy who's worried about the bottom line, right? You start to lose that vulnerability. So a great servant leader is one that can maintain that openness, that vulnerability, even as their company grows.
And that leads to stories. So how can a servant leader, and that's well said, use stories to lead better?
Yeah, it's by sharing their own personal experiences, sharing their failures, right? Being humble. I think there's a place for talking about your accomplishments and not humble brag, right? None of that humble brags stuff. But look, hey, I accomplished great stuff, but it wasn't always easy, right? Showing the steps you go through. I had a CEO I worked with one time. Blew my mind. This guy was leading a $2.5 billion company that I worked at. Came in on his first day on the job. He went and did an Ask Me Anything with all the company's 3,500 employees. We went on an AMA and said, come on, first day on the job, ask me anything you like. Right? Unbelievable that he was that willing to be open and vulnerable and sharing parts of himself. When we share of ourselves, we get so much back.
That's
Right?
serving. That's
It
serving.
is. It is, because it allows people to be their true self at work. And when people are their true selves, when they're able to say, I'm lost here, right? I'm confused about this project. I don't really feel like I understand why, right? All of a sudden, they're actually more productive, more engaged employees who are going to stay there longer. We're going to recommend the company to people. You know, all those things come through when they're, you know, people are interviewing at companies. They're going to get a sense of what the culture is like.
Yeah.
If people are telling stories about the impact that they've been able, like my business has had a great impact because I have learned, because sometimes people have blinders at companies, right? They know their niche, they know what they do, they don't know how they can affect the end user. So making sure that your folks understand the impact they're having on others, that's really powerful.
Huge. It's huge. It's empowering them. So what's interesting that came to my mind is a great question. Is there ever a place for a negative story? We talked about all the positivity. Here's what stories do. Is there a place for a negative story?
Well, how do you define a negative story? Would you define negative story or something
Well,
fail?
let's say in business, working with your employees.
Yeah, if you're talking about a negative story as something where something didn't go right, right?
Correct.
Those are really valuable. They show your human side. They show that everybody messes up. How you come back from it is what matters. How honest you are about it matters. So if I've got a CEO, I've got a leader, and that person is comfortable saying, boy, I know a lot of people who were wondering what happened at my last job, how I ended up here. I screwed up. I took my eye off the ball. I didn't pay enough attention to the culture, and they fired me. Right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're human. Right? Most of us have gotten fired from a job or
Oh.
laid off or whatever it is, right? Most of us have left jobs, as I like to say, been left from jobs.
Yeah. That's a good phrase.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I don't know who said it first, right? That we learn more from failure than we do from success. But yeah, now if negative stories about talking badly about someone, no, I think there's never a place for
Yeah.
that. Right.
Good.
I think, and this is tough for people sometimes, because there's the natural tendency to want to talk about your competitors negatively. And to me, that's something you just have to resist with all your power.
I
Right. I heard some,
don't disagree with it.
I was in an event once and someone from Amazon was there speaking, obviously very smart company. And she said, I spend 1% of my time thinking about my competitors, 99% of my time thinking about my customers.
Well said. And she's probably successful.
Probably successful.
There you go.
Now, I do look at that. When I work with companies, I do look at their competitors. And the reason I do that is I look at how their competitors are telling their stories. I drill down to the word level. What words are your competitors using to tell their stories? Because if they're using certain words, Let's not use those. Right? Let's find our own words that are memorable, ownable, and honest. That's the triad that I go for. Let's tell stories in our own way, using our own words that we can own. So that is a time where I do look, because you could inadvertently start using a phrase that your competitors are using as well.
You want to be unique and different. That's where a story can do that.
That actually applies to us more than it applies to them.
Yeah.
Too bad they got it first.
Yeah. Move on, find something else.
Don't try and find it. Find another way to
Yeah.
say it.
Yeah. So we're running out of time here, but a big question that came to mind: tonality when you're telling your story. How important is that?
How important? Ask me that again.
Tonality, your tone, how you do the, you levels of your tone is speaking when you're telling that story. I'm getting deep now, a little deeper.
Yeah, well, because how you deliver a story is as important as the content. And that's some of where the practice comes in. Learning how to phrase things, allowing for moments of silence, like I just did there, right? All those things are really important. You have great politicians who are amazing orators, right? You go back to JFK and things like that. It's an art, and I love helping speakers become great speakers. And one of the things that I do is, I can write to a speaker's strengths, because not everybody's going to tell things the same way. So I'm not going to make everybody sound like JFK, right? They've got to sound like themselves. But there are certain ways that, you take a really long sentence that tells a lot of details, then you go short.
There you go.
There you go. I just did it right there, right? So those kind of things here's a fun one. If you find that people aren't listening quite as much, you talk a little softer. You go the other direction. Make them lean forward. And I tell clients this. I said, this is the critical part of your story. At this part in your story, people are either going to lean forward or they're going to lean back. That's why you've got to hit this part, because if you get them to lean forward, you've got them for the rest of the story.
That's fantastic. Well, we've run out of time here, Dan.
Yeah.
You've been a blessing. I learned more about stories. I got a notebook full of notes. I'm sure my listeners are writing notes or wanting to reach out, and they will. I'll put all that in the show notes. Thank you again for being on.
It's been a ton of fun. Yeah, we could have talked for another hour. I love your questions. I love the mission of what you're doing, and so happy to have been on today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that. And everybody, listen to this a couple of times. Get a storytelling down by practicing and learning more how to tell your story. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Steve.